Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2023. And that brings us to a title, a work that is contained within this wonderful set that was released by Criterion during this year of 2023. This set collectively is given spine number 1189, and the set is called Bo Widerberg's New Swedish Cinema. And there are a number of films, 4 feature films, in fact, contained within this set. And so today I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on the first of such feature films, directed by Bo Widerberg. And this is a work which is described as being from the year 1963. And it is directed by Bo Widerberg. And the name of the work is, and please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation of the Swedish language. I hope you can forgive me. But the name of the work is Barnvagnen, or as it's known in English, The Baby Carriage. This is the work, the extraordinary work, amazing work, directed by Bo Widerberg. And this is credited to, written by Bo Widerberg and directed by Bo Widerberg, with the cinematography by Jan Troell. And among its incredible cast, we have people like Inger Tolbe and Tommy Berggren and Lars Pasgård and others. And the name of the work is, and once again, I must apologize so deeply, so profusely for my poor pronunciation. I hope you can forgive me. I am doing my best. But the name of the work is Barnvagnen, or as it's known in English, The Baby Carriage. And what I have here is the Criterion Collection 4-disc set. 4 discs, each containing 1 feature film directed by Bo Widerberg. So the first Blu-ray disc is featuring The Baby Carriage, which is what I have in the player now. So from 1963. This is quite a remarkable work, and I think if we were to try to focus in on the plot or story structure of this, we would be drawn, I think, immediately to the story and the struggles and the triumphs and indeed the daily lives and feelings and emotions and perspectives of the main characters as represented or as captured by or as otherwise portrayed in this really splendid film. Those main characters being, or perhaps we would focus even further on our main character, who is this young woman named Britt, who is the Inger Tolbe character. And we see, I think, immediately her life and her situation in terms of her daily life, her daily living, the family, community connections, her connections and, working class situation. We see her in a type of working class environment, in a environment of a type of modernity or city living, which is also another one of, I think, a number of environments that are also featured here in Bo Widerberg's film, as well as I think in other films, Malma, for example. But we have this portrait of a current modern day life or living with this young woman at the center of this portrait and this cinematic, say, representation. And among the various things that we see this young woman, Britt, our main character, engaged in, we see her, we get senses of her daily life, both maybe in and out of the workplace, and how she has fun and how she relaxes and tries to have a good time, tries to live a fun and happy life. And that might be seen in the context of aspects and situations rooted in a community, which in turn might be said to have roots in a type of tradition or a cultural tradition that may or may not be at odds with the emerging industrialized modernity of the various landscapes that we see here and there in the baby carriage. So that's one aspect. And we see almost from the get-go a sense of tension between these various, say, positions, that between modernity and tradition, with Brit Ingrid Hober's character perhaps front and center in the context of the baby carriage, this film. And within that, or as the film progresses, we also see other aspects of her life. For example, we see her interactions with two young men, respectively. These are the Lars the Lars Pasgaard character and the Tommy Berggren character, respectively. And we see her interactions with them. She has very close and intimate relationships with them that are emotional, that are sexual, and that are also, I think, expressions of say, sexuality and sort of identity and presence as well. But also they introduce various forms of, say, questions and other concerns that bring us throughout the film, The Baby Carriage. So one of such questions or concerns might be said to be what these young men may represent in the context of Brit's own life, should she decide to be with one of these men or the other, depending on what types of life choices might be prevalent, or might be resulting from certain choices that she might have to make, or that she might be expected to make, or that society might be expecting her to make. That might be a better way of putting it. And so we see various interactions of the time together, her and the Lars Pasgaard character, respectively, and her and the Tommy Berggren character, respectively. And we see various different backgrounds also emerging. These young men seem also to be coming from different walks of life, potentially. They also seem, therefore, to have certain varying or different views, perhaps, on their own modern living, on sexuality, on relationships, which also may have some significant impact in Brit's own life, depending on what path she decides to choose. And if the path that she decides to choose ends up being a path with one particular young man or another particular young man, or perhaps something else, we shall see. But in any event, in the relationships, or in the snippets, or excerpts of the moments together between the characters respectively, I think we can also get a sense of this as well, sort of the sense of the past and the present and the future intertwining in the daily goings-on of these characters, again with the main character of the Ingrid Hober character, Brit, at center of this. And I think we also can get a sense, too, of the ability or inability of characters to connect in the context of this modern society. And I would say perhaps that the ability to connect is very prevalent and quite in a lively way present in the context of the Bo Widerberg cinema universe, in a manner of speaking, because we do see moments of, I think, quite tender connection. We see moments where characters, I think, maybe because of or despite their surroundings, and perhaps sometimes because of their surroundings, they are able to make really deep and lovely connections, even if they might be fleeting, or they might be momentary and temporary, and they might vanish in the next moment. For various moments throughout the course of the film, we do see, I think, deep connections. One of the famous moments involves two characters listening to music, to Vivaldi, and there's no spoken language between them, but there is a music present, and we know that the two of them are listening to it. But also there's a sense that maybe by the act of this listening, they are making a closer and deeper connection with each other. This is an example that I'm referring to. So this is in no way shown in, say, a contravention against or a contradiction to their surroundings, or they are not necessarily being shown to be making connection in spite of their socio-political situations, etc. I think it's all meant to be a type of integrated whole. Things occur because of or in the context of where they are, which I think is one of the great strengths of this, while also in a nuanced way providing a social-political, cultural context, which I think upon rewatch and reread it becomes really, really clear in terms of possible interpretations. But that, I think, is an example of how Bo Widerberg in this work, and indeed in others, really shows a wonderful tenderness in how characters are portrayed and handled, and providing enough room and space to let them show who they are. And indeed, I mentioned moments of tenderness. There are also moments where this tenderness gives way to some moments of perhaps shocking disconnect, or attempts at trying to connect with someone else, but those attempts, for one reason or other, are seen to me to not necessarily work or not necessarily make the connection. And these two accumulate in a way that I think forms the path, if you will, or the trajectory of our characters. Brit being again our main protagonist, and showing her trajectory and her choice and her, say, dilemmas or issues that confront her, and how she is trying, therefore, to handle the situation and make certain choices, and whatever those choices may be, at the end of the day, whether they are things that she can be content with, or she can still provide a sense of self-worth, or the contrary. So I think this is part of the overall trajectory, and indeed the great interest that is generated when one watches this film, the Baby Carriage. So in this process, I think we are always focusing in on the characters themselves and who they are, and the moments between them, or the moments of them alone pondering, or those moments where they're sitting next to each other, maybe exchanging a word or a glance, or maybe they're sitting in a car, or maybe they're walking down the street, or maybe they're in their room by themselves having a conversation or an argument, or silence, or maybe an emotional moment, or indeed a physical sexual moment. These, I think, are captured in a really tender and intimate and direct way, and I think a very honest way, by Bo Widerberg and company, in a way that I think is quite memorable and quite meaningful. And I love the way the film compares and contrasts symbols and aspects of modernity and symbols and aspects of tradition, sometimes within the same shot. So sometimes we might have a car and on the road on the one moment, and we might have a passing person riding on a horse the other moment, or the images of, say, apartment complexes, type of modernity looking complexes, or symbols and images of industry and factories on the one hand, versus the environment, the natural environment and surroundings, the open skies and the sea and the open waters, Malma, etc. So I think those are wonderful comparisons and contrasts. And it's an interesting approach, because Bo Widerberg and company might be suggesting a number of things. They might be suggesting that there is an inherent contradiction between these two, or there might be some kind of means to integrate them, or to find a type of coexistence, peaceful coexistence between these two various, say, aspects, the modern and the traditional. And if we are to find one interpretation in favor of the other, I think we could say that that would also inform how we view the trajectory of our main character, the Inger Tober character. Do we see her at the center of this conflict between modernity and tradition, again in a socio-political, cultural context, or do we see her at the center of what one might call a peaceful coexistence between the modern and the tradition? I think that's a really interesting possible way of interpreting either way. And I think there might be other modes of interpretation, that's for sure, but I would probably favor the peaceful coexistence integral aspect viewpoint, because I see Inger Tober's performance in particular as having a sense of, I don't want to say defiance, but a sense or a sense of complacency, but a type of psychologically based assurance about who she is because of her surroundings or despite her surroundings or due to her surroundings or in the context of her surroundings, excuse me. I find that her character, Brit, has a type of psychological confidence and assurance. There are issues that confront her. There are various things that are quite life-altering that occur throughout the course of this film, that's for sure. But we see her struggle. We see her trying to understand what these are. We see her trying to deal with this situation. And perhaps at the end of the day, we might also see her not just accept these points, but also regard them as being something about who she is as an individual. So nothing in terms of a type of conflict against her character, but in fact part of who she is in a very humane and soulful way, which I think is very powerful approach to handling of her character. And again, this aspect of modernity and tradition also is encapsulated in the filmmaking style itself. There is a way in which this film and the camera work glides through the streets and the open air and the environments. There is a focus on, quote unquote, the youth, the younger generation, although there are aspects of other generations and perhaps generational shifts or generational gaps as well in the various episodes that we see as the film progresses. There is an interesting jazzy type of musical score that accompanies some of the film's adventures, while also I think really being interestingly counterbalanced by some quotations from classical music. I mentioned this scene involving listening to classical music as being one of the famous scenes of the film. And so I like these point counterpoints in the film. There's a sense of a style, almost a nouvelle vague type of style on the one hand, while also giving way to a presentation that could almost be said to be a type of cinema verite. So style, an applied style versus an attempt at capturing, quote unquote, a reality, or maybe different styles of music or different styles of say an approach, the guiding hand of the director versus the camera capturing the moment. And one doesn't necessarily need to see those as being conflicting or battling against each other. In fact, those can be seen to be integrated, peacefully coexisting between and among each other. And I think that is one of the ways that I see a film like Bo Widerberg's The Baby Carriage, and indeed many of his other works. This is the first time that I'm watching this film, The Baby Carriage, and I must say that I was really quite stunned. I was astonished. I was astonished by how much I felt it was telling a story that that again created a lovely balance between capturing a moment that was cinema verite like on the one hand, while also applying and adding aspects of a type of cinematic style. Never ever letting go of the importance of the characterizations and giving us wonderful flourishes of camera work, while also giving us wonderful entry points and windows into something of the culture and the times of the moment, the early 1960s Sweden. So in the context of the story of this young woman, this remarkable character portrayed by Inger Tova and Brit. So this is a first-time watch for me, but I've seen it now a number of times, and I've been taken with it. Quite much every time I've been able to see this. So I am incredibly impressed with this work. Again, this is a film described as being from the year 1963, directed by Bo Widerberg, and the film is The Baby Carriage. The Criterion Collection has released this film, The Baby Carriage, again described as being from the year 1963, as part of this great set from Criterion, which is Bo Widerberg's New Swedish Cinema. This New Swedish Cinema Blu-ray set is at spine number 1189. So the set is given collectively the spine number 1189. The individual films are not assigned a spine number individually, but that's okay. This is a 4-disc Blu-ray set. So we have 4 films, each given its own disc. So on the first Blu-ray disc, which is what I have in the player right now, we have the feature film, which is The Baby Carriage, plus some supplements, which we'll talk about a little bit later. If we were to talk about the presentation, let me just refer to the booklet here for the set. And I've taken the liberty of removing this prior to the start of this video recording. It is a staple booklet, which is wonderful, and I'll talk a little bit about aspects of the staple booklet later. But if we turn to page 32 of the booklet, it says about the masters, and I quote, "The Baby Carriage is presented in the aspect ratio of 1.33 to 1. This new digital master was created in high definition from the 35mm original camera negative. The original monaural soundtrack was remastered from the 35mm magnetic track." So I have mentioned before that I've seen a number of Bo Widerberg's works before, but not all of them. And among the films that I have not seen before is The Baby Carriage. So this is my first time to watch this film, courtesy of this Criterion Collection release. Therefore, I don't have any strong frame of reference. I've never seen this film in past releases, for example, so I can't say any type of comment comparatively how this new Criterion disc compares to, say, any past release that I might have seen or past presentation I might have seen, because I've never seen anything before up till now. That being said, I must say that I was very taken with this film. I was totally swept up by this. I was drawn into this world of Brit and the others in the context of 1960 Sweden. And I thought the way that it looked, the crispness of it, the type of the contrast, the black and white contrast of the photography, which is beautiful, by the way, really shows aspects of the environment, the detail, which is incredibly important. Light shining as well, reflections and refractions, but reflections of light shining. This is a key part of the film as well. And so how this is captured is so elegant and so poetic. And I think, and I'd like to think that the way this is being presented as well is part of the reason why, or maybe one of the main reasons why, this presentation, I think, is very eye-catching as well as ear-catching in a manner of speaking, because it does preserve aspects, or does show to how music is very important in this landscape. I mentioned before examples of why this is so. And so it seems like the soundtrack is really given a lot of full force and a lot of vitality. And so I'm very impressed with this. Again, my first time to watch this film, but I think I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Thanks in no small sum to the presentation, how it looks and sounds, courtesy of this Criterion Collection release. Well done, well done. And now let us speak about the supplements that can be found with this film. So once again, let me say that this is a 4-disc set, Bo Widerberg's New Swedish Cinema. Each film in this set is on one of those discs. So disc 1 is The Baby Carriage, disc 2 is Raven's End, which we'll talk about in a separate video, disc 3 is Elvira Madigan, which we'll also talk about in a separate video, and disc 4 is Odalen 31, which we'll also talk about in a separate video. And each of these films is accompanied by a supplement section. So the Baby Carriage disc, Blu-ray disc number 1, has, as well as the film, supplements. And when you scroll down to the submenu and push on the supplements button, you'll see 3 things that come up. So the first thing that comes up is Ruben Östlund's interview. And it says, in this interview, conducted by the Criterion Collection in 2023, filmmaker Ruben Östlund discusses his creative collaboration with one of director Bo Widerberg's contemporaries, producer Kalle Boman, and the influence of Widerberg on Swedish cinema. So this is an interview with Ruben Östlund, and this is approximately 14 minutes. So Ruben Östlund is a filmmaker, a director, and indeed, those who know, for example, Triangle of Sadness will recognize the name Ruben Östlund. Triangle of Sadness is indeed also a film that appears in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog. But we have a one-on-one interview with him, and he is talking about his first interactions with a filmmaker or producer named Kalle Bowman. And Kalle Bowman is mentioned here, is mentioned also in the opening moments of the interview. And Kalle Bowman is a very important collaborator with Ruben Östlund, especially during his early part of his career. And Kalle Bowman is also someone who has worked with Bo Widerberg. So this is Ruben Östlund's way of introducing how he got introduced, or one of the ways in which he got introduced to the world of Bo Widerberg, quite directly, in fact, via his relationship with Kalle Bowman. So this is quite a great interview. I would say from the outset that it's probably or it's not probably, I strongly recommend that one watches all of the films in the set first before watching this Ruben Östlund interview. This interview by Ruben Östlund is one where he speaks about Bo Widerberg overall, generally, making reference to films such as The Baby Carriage, but also to other films like Raven's End, like Odalen 31, or I should say Odalen Tretiot, excuse me, or 31, or Elvira Madigan. He does make reference to those films, and indeed other films that aren't included in this set, such as Love 65, Man on the Roof, Man from Mallorca, and also there's a clip from Serpent's Way, I understand. So this is something where I would therefore recommend that one watches all of the films in the set first, and then you can return to the first Blu-ray disc and this first supplement that appears on this first Blu-ray disc, that being the Ruben Östlund interview. Once you've done that, and once you've come back here and you can watch this interview, and it is a great one, he does talk about The Baby Carriage and capturing moments that seem trivial, that seem mundane day to day, but have potentially a big impact. And not just how they affect the plot, but also just how they inform us in terms of who these characters are and what their living situations are, etc. And these are lovely moments. And listening to music, or as they're walking down the street, or being in the work environment, or observing someone in a generational, observing someone else, for example, or just being with someone intimately, being next to someone intimately, or the like, or being by oneself, walking with light shining in one's eyes, for example. And this is a key moment. So this is one aspect that Ruben Östlund reminds us about the importance of Bo Widerberg's cinema. Also, the context of Bo Widerberg and Swedish cinema, and reminding us perhaps that there were many strong voices and people in Swedish cinema, Ingmar Bergman being an example that Ruben Östlund mentions. And so Bo Widerberg in many ways is part of that tradition, but also in many ways perhaps countering that tradition. And this is a point that is brought up also in the essay, how some of the films of Bo Widerberg can be said to be contrasts to the films of contemporaries like Bergman at the time. And so I think a film like Elvira Madigan comes up, and I'll try to control my comments about that film, but just general things about photography and the use of color, for example, is used as an example of how Ruben Östlund and perhaps others view Bo Widerberg as being part of, quote unquote, a type of a tradition of Swedish cinema, at least in an international context on the one hand, but also being part of, or being forging his own way and his own path. And that way and path had a lot to do with his background in terms of film criticism and film writing that led into him being a film director. So his trajectory is not unlike aspects of, say, French Nouvelle Vague, which is also referred to in terms of style and substance by Ruben Östlund. And we get a sense of that too in the type of effervescence of camera work. We also understand his work with Jan Troell, and also his work with other directors of photography like Jürgen Paschen and others, and that will come again in the latter part of this set, the Paschen cinematography, which is incredible in some of the later films. And we also understand too that, again, from Ruben Östlund's perspective, filmmaking is perhaps inherently a type of political expression. And there are aspects of class dynamics, what one might call even class struggle, in his films. They might be present quite directly in some films, but they are indeed present too, one can argue, in a film like The Baby Carriage, because we do see a character that is inhabiting a working class environment. And indeed, it could be said that her character, Britt, is someone who maybe is not in keeping with, or perhaps not going along with, what one might call the quote-unquote traditional social mores or expectations of someone in that position. On the contrary, she seems to be making choices or finding a solution or position, both culturally and in terms of her own individual perception of herself, as well as quote-unquote her place in society, end quote. There is a way in which, again, she might be able to find a type of common ground or a type of solution or a type of way forward, despite or perhaps because of what one might call the class struggle as presented in The Baby Carriage. I think that type of approach is in keeping very much with comments by Ruben Östlund in this great interview. We get a little sense too of Bo Widerberg's career beyond the films that we see in the set. Once again, there are mentions of The Baby Carriage and also mentioning of other films like Raven's End. There's an interesting anecdote, by the way, at the very start of this interview with regard to Kalle Bowman and Kalle Bowman's comment to Bo Widerberg about the film Raven's End. So that's an interesting anecdote that opens the film, but opens the interview, excuse me. There are other films that are referenced. Love 65 I mentioned, Man from Mallorca I mentioned, Man on the Roof, Serpent's Way. Those films aren't included in the set, unfortunately. So when I see this interview, I'm very much curious, and I want to see those films. One hopes, perhaps, fingers crossed, that maybe that they might be released, or maybe they're already released in some other fashion. But in any event, if they're released on physical media, that would be really wonderful. But in any event, we do get a focus on Bo Widerberg's career and perspective, and how that legacy has inspired filmmakers of Ruben Östlund's generation and beyond. So this is a really interesting introduction into the world and career of Bo Widerberg. I would say that it is something where it makes me want to know more about Bo Widerberg. And it doesn't touch upon maybe the biographical details of Bo Widerberg's life. So it would have been interesting to maybe get other supplements going into, say, the life and times of Bo Widerberg, the biographical details of Bo Widerberg, his career leading up to how he decided to make this film, again, as his feature film debut, The Baby Carriage. So we don't get those details here. Not that we might expect them, because, again, Ruben Östlund is talking about it from, I think, really strong perspectives already. So it's a really great interview. But let me talk about this now. This interview, it's really great, which makes me therefore want more. I would have loved to have seen other supplements here and in other places that might have spoken to, say, biographical aspects of Bo Widerberg. Because, again, I'm approaching this, for the most part, or quite generally, or actually specifically, I'm approaching this for the first time, in a manner of speaking. So I'm eager to learn more, and I would have loved to have learned more about, say, the biographical details of Bo Widerberg. We don't necessarily get that as a focus, but that's not the focus of this interview. What we have is the impact, the cultural and cinematic impact of Bo Widerberg on filmmakers like Ruben Östlund, and that being a discussion point or entryway into discussing Bo Widerberg's place in Swedish cinema and world cinema, and indeed cinema writ large, through great examples like The Baby Carriage and others. So it's a great interview, absolutely great interview. So please check it out if you can, but I'm sure once you've seen it, you might, like me, feel the same in that you might want to know more about Bo Widerberg. So, but in any event, we have this great interview again with Ruben Östlund, approximately 14 minutes. And then continuing on, we have The Boy and the Kite, or again, please pardon me for my poor pronunciation of the language, but this is Pojken och Draken, and this is described as being made in 1962 in Malmö, Sweden. The Boy and the Kite, Pojken och Draken, is Bo Widerberg's first short film. Based on Widerberg's script, it was co-directed and shot by filmmaker Jan Torell on a 16mm Pirate camera. Excuse me. And the film itself is approximately 30 minutes. And we also have, we have the film, which is right here, and then we have introduction by Jan Torell. And this is an introduction approximately 2 minutes. And he's talking about, Jan Torell is talking about the aspects of the film. Maybe there is a type of a sense of improvisational style, in a manner of speaking, in terms of positioning cameras, or sort of being inspired on the spot, where it was shot, in the context of Malmö or industrial aspects of Malmö. And here we have a story. So that's the introduction with Jan Troell. It's great. It's brief, very brief, but for what we get, it's a great taste, a great sense of what is to come, which is the film itself. And also it's a reminder too of the very key collaboration between Jan Troell, and whose also works are also represented in the Criterion Collection Physical Media Catalog, Jan Troell and Bo Widerberg. So this is a very important collaboration in the context of this film, the short film, as well as The Baby Carriage. So it's a great reminder of that. And then when we get to the film itself, The Boy and the Kite, Pojken och Draken, this is a really fascinating film. It's approximately 30 minutes. Again, Malmö is also shown, so we have that connection. And also there's this idea of the industrial society and the individual from the viewpoint of this character, this boy, a childlike viewpoint, child's perspective. Environment, sky, so a playful, almost innocence is also represented, as well as reminders of the currency of the moment. And one can say, therefore, that there is this sense of a type of quote-unquote peaceful coexistence between seemingly differing aspects, namely modernity and tradition, again from the child's perspective, a la The Boy and the Kite. So in that way there is a real sense of a type of joie de vivre, despite, or perhaps in the context of what one might call the emerging industrial based working classes, working class strata representations, whether that is direct or indirect, or whether that can be gleaned from or otherwise directly represented by what we see in the film The Boy and the Kite. It's a great film. It's a really great film. It's a wonderful companion piece to The Baby Carriage, and also it's a great sense of, there's a great sense of style and almost a freedom that you can feel in terms of where the camera is operating. And also too, there's this intimate way in which things are shown and information is portrayed in this way without, let's say, without a lot of reliance necessarily on the spoken word or language, which I find very fascinating as well. Type of cinema language that's being employed here, which is also could be said to be something that is captured very vividly in the film The Baby Carriage. In any event, The Boy and the Kite. This is also my first time watching this short film, and I was incredibly taken with this. It's a remarkable work. It is a great companion piece, as well as standing on its own, another example of the work of Bo Widerberg and Jan Troell, in fact, co-directed and shot by filmmaker Jan Troell. So that is The Boy and the Kite. So that's the second of the supplements, including the introduction, I might add, which is great. It's brief, very, very brief, but it's great. And then we have Bo Widerberg, and this is described as, in this 1963 interview for the Swedish television program Director Bo Widerberg discusses the national film industry and his debut feature, The Baby Carriage. So this is very, very brief. It's about 1 minute, 2 minutes, something like that. So very brief. Again, I would have loved to have had this longer, but oh well, c'est la vie. But what we do get here are some snippets and insights into Bo Widerberg's. There's a type of question that is trying to point to why he wanted to make this as a feature film, and his background, I think alluding to his background as a critic and writer. He does make this comment, although, again, I'm not so familiar with his writings, unfortunately, so it's hard for me to understand the full context of it, but still, he does then go into his impressions of the film industry. As it does mention, he talks about budgets and what are some acceptable range of budgets for films that are being made versus what he perceives to be a more quote-unquote reasonable budget, which is lower in terms of what is expected in terms of films being made. So he doesn't mention that the low-budget nature of films that intrigue him, which I think The Baby Carriage is part of that discussion. And he also talks here about working, or he's asked about working on this film, working with the actors here, Lars Pasgaard and Tommy Berggren and Inger Tobe, and so he does talk to hear about the sort of concern that he has, that he wanted to capture in making this. It's very brief. I would love to have had it much longer. Maybe the full program would have been great, but for what it's worth, we are getting a great insight into Bo Widerberg. We're getting him actually speaking and talking, so he strikes a very very memorable presence, I must say. So in any event, here is the excerpt, again, discussion with Bo Widerberg from 1963. So that concludes, as I say, the supplements that accompany this Disc 1. And without giving away too much, I should say that in terms of quantity, we are going to get similar aspects of quantity when we are talking about the other discs in this set. So I'm left here feeling like I want to know more about The Baby Carriage and more about Bo Widerberg's life and times, and we will get actually a great sense of that in the writing. Let me take a step back. So in situations like this, again, in terms of the quantity of the supplements on the discs themselves, if you feel like they are leaving one wanting, then of course we will go to the booklet, which is fantastic, by the way, and we'll talk about this later in a separate video. But in any event, we have here maybe a low number of supplements in terms of quantity, but what we do get are fascinating glimpses into the working attitudes and approaches of Bo Widerberg, early film, and also brief yet very fascinating description from Jan Torell, as well as this wonderful, intimate, and affectionate take by Ruben Östlund about The Baby Carriage, and indeed many others. So for what we do get is great in and of itself, so I do want to emphasize that. But this is, again, the supplements that accompany Disc 1 for The Baby Carriage. And let us conclude our discussion, at least for now, and in the context of The Baby Carriage, let's conclude with what can be found with regard to The Baby Carriage in this great booklet. Now, the booklet has a number of writings that could be said to be general, have a general application. That's, in other words, an application over the films collectively. And these writings are fantastic, by the way. And we'll talk about those writings again in the context of an overarching discussion of the set writ large. But for now, if we were to focus on what can be found specifically regarding The Baby Carriage, I can direct your attention, for example, to pages 4 and 5 of the booklet. So we have a picture and also the title, The Baby Carriage, plus information about the running time, the casting credits, and a synopsis, which I think, my understanding, it matches the synopsis that can be found, for example, on the Criterion Collection website. So we aren't getting any film-specific writings individually, although I must say that we do get film-specific sections in the overarching essay, which is by Peter Cowie, called Another Sweden. So in fact, in that essay, in fact, on page 18, we do get a section of the Peter Cowie general overall essay, which is given the subtitle of The Baby Carriage. So there is also that aspect of it as well. But maybe we can talk about this. I'd like to talk about the Peter Cowie essay a little bit in a separate video. But just for your information, there are Baby Carriage film specific parts of the Peter Cowie essays, again starting on page 18, plus the general information about the film itself on pages 4 and 5 of the booklet. So just in case you're interested. But we will talk about this booklet overall and the set overall later. But for now, that is the film The Baby Carriage, again on Blu-ray disc number 1. I am, again, to conclude, I watched this film for the first time courtesy of this Criterion Collection release, and it is great. It is really great. It is fresh and lively and emotional, and it has a sense of a heaviness, which is also, I think, in keeping with and very organic and very consistent with and very much respectful of the stories of these characters, with great performances, including Inger Toba in this wonderful central role in this film, which is The Baby Carriage. All right, so that's it for this film, but we will continue on with our discussions of the films in this great set, Bo Widerberg's New Swedish Cinema. And next up in this video series discussion will be a discussion on the film Raven's End. So I hope to see you, if you're interested, at that next video. But until then, my dear friends, please continue to be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including the works of Bo Widerberg, including films that can be found in the Criterion Collection and beyond. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.